by myself. We'll edit that. We are in part 2 of the Jim Butcher series of the Dresden Files series. And this is the first book, Stormfront. We left it off at chapter 4, so let's get into it. Chapter 4. Monica, no last name, was standing outside of my office when I got there, writing on the back of the note I had left taped to my office. I walked toward her, but she was too intent upon her writing to look up. She was a good-looking woman in her mid-30-somethings, ash blonde hair that I thought must be natural, after a morbid and involuntary memory of the dead woman's dye job. Her makeup was tasteful and well applied, and her face was fair, friendly, with enough roundness of cheek to look fresh-faced and young. Oh, fuck. And young, enough fullness of mouth to look very feminine. She was wearing a long full skirt of pastel yellow with brown riding boots, a crisp white blouse, and an expensive-looking green cardigan over it to ward off the chill of early spring. She had to be in good shape to pull off a color combination like that, and she did. Overall, there's a nagging familiar look, something like Annette Finichiello or Barbara Belinsky, maybe. Wholesome and all-American. Monica, I asked. I put my most innocent and friendly smile. She blinked at me as I approached. Oh, are you, Harry? I smiled and offered her my hand. Harry Dresden, ma'am, that's me. She took my hand after a tiny pause and kept her eyes firmly focused on my chest. At this point, I was just as glad to be dealing with someone who was too nervous to risk looking at my eyes. I gave her a firm but gentle handshake and let go of her, brushing past her to unlock the office door and open it up. I apologized for being late. I got a call from the police that I had to look in on. You did? She asked. You mean the police? She waved her fingers instead of finishing the sentence, and entered when I held the door open for her. Sometimes, I nodded. They run into something and want my take on it. What sort of things? I shrugged and swallowed. I thought of the corpses of Madison and felt green. And I looked up at Monica. She was studying my face, chewing on her lip nervously. She hurriedly averted her gaze. Can I get you some coffee? I asked her. I shut the door behind us, flicking on the lights. No. Oh, no, thank you. I'm fine, she stood there, looking at my box of discarded paperbacks and holding her purse over her tummy with both hands. I thought she might scream if I had said boo, so I made sure to move carefully and slowly, making myself a cup of instant coffee. Breathed in and out, going through the familiar emotions until I had calmed down from my encounter with Marcone. By the time I was done, so was my coffee. I went to my desk and invited her to have a seat in one of the two chairs across from me. Okay, Monica, I said. What can I do for you today? Well, I told you that my husband she gestured at me. Missing, I supplied. Yes, she said with an exclamation of almost relief. But he's not mysteriously missing or anything, just gone. She flushed and stammered, like she packed up a few things and left. But he didn't say anything to anyone, and he hasn't shown up again. I'm concerned about him. Huh, I said. How long has he been gone? This is the third day, she said. I nodded. There must be some reason why you're coming to me rather than a private investigator or the police. She blushed again. She had a good face for blushing. Fair skin that colored girlishly. It was quite fetching, really. Yes, he has an interest in magic. Yes, he said he had been busy buying. He had been buying books on it in the religious section of the bookstore. Like those Dungeon and Dragon games, the real thing. He bought some of those tarot cards. She pronounced it like carrot. Amateurs. And you think his disappearance might have something to do with this interest? I'm not sure, she confessed, but maybe. He was very upset. He had just lost his job and was under a lot of pressure. I'm worried about him. I thought whoever found him might need to be able to talk to him about all of this stuff. She took a deep breath, as if the effort of completing so many sentences with a single had tired her. Still not clear on this. Why me? Why not the police? Her knuckles whitened on her purse. He packed a bag, Mr. Dresden. I think the police will just assume he left his wife and his child. They won't really look. But he didn't. He's not like that. He only wants to make a good life for us, really. That's all he wants. I frowned at her, nervous that maybe hubby had run out on you after all, dear. Even so, I said, why come to me? Why not a private investigator? I know a reliable man if you need one. Because she gestured fitfully, about magic, I said. Monica nodded. I think it might be important. I mean, I don't know, but I think it might. Where did he work? I asked. While I spoke, I got a pad of paper out of my pocket and jotted down a few notes. Silverco, she told me. They're a trading company. They locate good markets for products and then advise companies where they can best spend their money. Huh, I said. What is his name, Monica? She swallowed and I saw her twitching, trying to think of something to tell me other than his real name. George, she supplied at last. I looked up at her. She was staring fiercely down at her hands. Monica, I said. I know this was really hard for you to believe, ma'am, but there are plenty of people who are nervous when they come to my office. Please hear me out. I'm not out to hurt you or anyone else. What I do to help people. It's true that someone with the right skills could use your names against you, but I'm not like that. I borrowed a line from Johnny McCall. It isn't good for business. She gave a nervous little laugh. A nervous little laugh. I feel so silly, she confessed. There are so many things I've heard about. Wizards. I see. I put my pencil down and stapled my finger in a wizardly fashion. The woman was nervous and had certain expectations. I might ease her fears a little if I fulfilled some of them. I tried not to look over her shoulders at the calendar I had hung up on the wall, and the red circle on the 15th of last month. Light rent. Need money. Even with the fee for today and what I would make in the future, it would take the city forever to pay up. Besides, I could never resist going to the aid of a lady in distress, even if she wasn't completely 100% sure that she wanted to be rescued by me. Monica, I told him, there are powers in the universe that most people don't even know about. Powers that we still don't fully understand. The men and women who work with these powers see things in a different light than regular people. They come to understand things in a slightly different way. This sets them apart. Sometimes it breeds unwarranted suspicion and fear. I know you've read books and seen movies about how horrible people like me are, and that whole suffer not a witch to live part of the Old Testament hasn't made things all roses. But we really aren't any different from anyone else. I gave her my best smile. I want to help you, but if I'm going to do that, you're going to have to give me a little trust. I promise. I give you my word that I won't disappoint you. I saw her take this in and chew on it for a while staring at her hands. Victor, she said at last. Victor Sells. All right, I said, picking up my pencil and duly noting it. So any place he might have gone that you could think of offhanded? She nodded. The lake house. You have a house down by. She waved her hand. The lake? She beamed at me, and I reminded myself to be patient. In Lake Providence, over the state line around Lake Michigan. It's beautiful up there in the autumn. Okay then. Are you aware of any friends he might have run off to see? Family he might have visited? Anything like that? Oh, Victor wasn't speaking terms with his family. I never knew why. He didn't talk about them, really. We've been married for 10 years, and he never once spoke to them. Okay, said nodding that down too. Friends then? She fretted her lip, a gesture that seemed familiar to her. Not really. He was friends with his boss and some people at work, but after he was fired... Sorry. I heard noise outside, and I forgot there's a car show going on, like, the road next to me, so, like, they're revving their engines stuff. I said, I understand. I can use you writing things down, drawing bold lines between thoughts to separate them. Spilled over onto the next page before I was finished writing down the facts and my observations of Monica. I like to be thorough about this kind of thing. Well, Mr. Dresden, she asked, can you help me? I looked over the page and nodded. I think so, Monica, if possible. I'd like to see these things your husband collected which books, and so on. It would help if you had a picture of him too. Well, I might like to take a look at around your house at Lake Providence. Would that be all right? Of course, she said. She seemed relieved, but all at the same time, she seemed more nervous than before. I noted down the address of the lake house and brief instructions. We've got quite a bit of savings, Mr. Dresden, she told me. I'm not worried about the money. That seemed like an odd statement for her at this time, out of tune with her generally nervous manner. Well done, I told her. I charge $50 an hour plus expenses. I'll send I'll send you an itemized list of what I do, so you'll have a good idea of what I'm working on. A retainer is customary. I'm not going to guarantee that I work exclusively on your case. I try to handle each of my customers with respect and courtesy, so I can't put any one of them before another. She nodded to me emphatically and reached into her purse. She drew away an envelope and passed it to me. There's 500 inside, she told me. Is that enough for now? Cha-ching. $500 would take care of last month's rent and a good bit of this month's too. I could get into the bit with nervous clients wanting to preserve the anonymity of their checking accounts for my supposed sorceress might. Cash always spends. That would be fine, yes, I told her. I tried not to fondle the envelope. At least I wasn't crass enough to dump the money on my desk and count it out. She drew out another envelope. He took most of his things with him. At least I couldn't find them where he usually keeps them. But I did find this. There was something in the envelope making me bulge. An amulet, ring, or charm of some kind. I was betting. A third envelope came out of her purse. The woman must be compulsively well organized. There's a picture of him in here and my phone number inside. Thank you, Mr. Dresden. When will you call? As soon as I know something, I told her. Probably by tomorrow afternoon or Saturday morning. Sound good? She almost looked at my eyes, caught herself, and smiled directly at my nose instead. Yes. Yes, thank you so much for your help. She glanced up at the wall. Oh, look at the time. I need to go. School's almost out. She closed her teeth over her words and flushed again as though embarrassed that she had let such an important fact about her slip. I'll do whatever I can, ma'am, I assured her, rising and walking her to the door. Thank you so much for your business. I'll be in touch soon. She said goodbyes, never looking me at the face, and fled out the door. I shut it behind her and went back to the envelopes. First, the money. It was all in 50s, which always look new, even when they're years old, because they get so little circulation. There were 10 of them. I put them in my wallet and trashed the envelope. The envelope with the photo in it was next. I took it out and regarded a picture of Monica and a man of lean and handsome features with a wide forehead and shaggy eyebrows that skewed in his handsomeness off onto a rather eccentric angle. His smile was whiter than white, and his skin had the smooth, dark tan of somebody who spent a lot of time in the sun, boating maybe. There was a sharp contrast against Monica's paleness, thick spells, I presume. The number was written on a plain white index card that had been neatly trimmed down to fit inside the envelope. There was no name or area code, just a 7-digit number. Got out my cross-listening directory and looked it up. I noted that down as well. I wonder what the woman had expected to accomplish by only giving out first names. Well, she'd be going to hand me a dozen other ways to finding out in any case. It only goes to show that people are funny when they're nervous about something. They say screwy things make odd choices, which in retrospect they feel amazingly cool for making. I would have to be careful not to say anything to rub that in when I spoke to her again. I trashed the second envelope and the last one, turning it upside down over my desk. The brown husk of a dead, dried scorpion glistened with some sort of preservative glaze, clicked down onto my desk. A, a supple braided leather cord fell off from a ring, set through the base of its tail, so that if it was worn, it would hang head down, tail up, pulled over the dried body to point at the ground. Shuddered. Scorpions were symbolically powerful in certain circles of belief. They weren't usually symbols of anything good or wholesome either. A lot of petty mean spells could be focused around a little talisman like that. If you wore it next to your skin, as such things are supposed to be worn, the prickly legs of the thing would be constant poking and agitation at your chest, a continual reminder that it was there. The dried stinger at the tail tip might actually pierce the skin of anyone who tried to give the wearer a hug. Its crab-like pincers would catch a man's chest hair or scratch at the curves of a woman's breast. Nasty, unpleasant things. Not evil as such, but you sure as hell weren't likely to do happy, shiny things with magic with such an item around your neck. Maybe Victor Spells had gotten involved in something real, something that had absorbed his attention. The art could do that to a person, particularly the darker aspect of it. If he had turned to it in despair after losing his job, maybe that would explain his sudden absence from home. A lot of sorcerers or wannabe sorcerers secluded themselves in the belief that isolation would increase their ability to focus on their magic. It did, but it did make it easier for a weak or untrained mind to avoid distraction. Or maybe it wasn't even a true talisman. Maybe it was just a curiosity or a souvenir from some visit to the Southwest. There wasn't any way for me to tell if it was indeed a device used to improve the focus and direction of magical energies, short of actually using it to attempt a spell. And I really don't want to be in such a dubious article for various of good reasons. I would have to keep this little unbeauty in mind as I tried to run this man down. It might well mean nothing, but on the other hand, it might not. I looked at the clock. 3:15. There was no time to check with the local morgues to see if they had turned up any likely John Does. Who knew my search might be over in the day's end, and then to get to the bank to deposit my money and fire off a check to my landlord. I got out my phone book and started calling up hospitals. Not really my routine line of work, but not difficult either, except for the standard problems I had using the telephone. Static, noises, other people's conversations being louder than mine. If something can go wrong, it will. Once I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a twitch of motion from the dried scorpion that sat on the desk. I blinked and stared at it. It didn't move. Cautiously, I extended my senses towards it like an invisible hand, feeling about for any traces of enchantment or magical energy. Nothing. It was as dry of an enchantment as it was of life. Never let it be said that Harry Jesson is afraid of dry, dead bug. Creepy or not, I wasn't going to let it ruin my concentration. So I scooped it up with the corner of the phone book and popped it into the middle drawer of my desk. Out of sight, out of mind. So I have a problem with creepy, dead, poisonous things. So sue me. Hold on, 10 seconds. I need a freaking drink. When I read this book, I end up talking so much that my mouth, like, everything dries up faster, which is normal, I guess. Chapter 5. McAnley's is a pub a few blocks from my house. I go there when I'm feeling stressed or when I have a few extra bucks to spend on a nice dinner. A lot of us fringe types do. Mac, the pub's owner, is used to wizards and all the problems that come along with us. There aren't any video games in McAnley's. There are no televisions or expensive computer trivial games. There's not even a jukebox. Mac is a player piano instead. It's less likely to go haywire around us. I say pub in all the best senses of the world. When you walk in, you take several steps down into a room with a deadly combination of a low clearance and ceiling fans. If you're tall like me, you walk carefully in McAnley's. There are 13 stools at the bar and 13 tables in the room. 13 windows set up high in the wall in order to be above ground level, let in some light from the street into the place. 13 mirrors on the walls cast back a reflection of the patrons in the dim detail and give the illusion of more space. 13 wooden columns carved with likeliness from folk tales and legend of the old world make it difficult to walk around the place without in a weaving a circuitous route. They also quite intentionally break up the flow of random energies, spelling to one degree or another, the auras that gather around broody, grumpy wizards and keeping them from manifesting in unintentional and colorful ways. The colors are all muted, earth browns and sea greens. The first time I entered McAnally's, I felt like a wolf returning to an old favorite den. Mac makes his own beer, ale really, and it's the best stuff in the city. His food is cooked on a wood burner stove, and you can damn well walk your own self over to the bar to pick up your order when it's ready, according to Mac. It's my sort of place. Since the calls to the morgue had turned up nothing, I kept a few bills out of Monica Sell's retainer and took myself to McAnally's. After the kind of day I've had, I deserved some of Mac's ale and someone else's cooking. I was going to be a long night too, once I went home and started trying to figure out how whoever it was had pulled off the death spell used on Johnny Marcone's hatchet man, Tommy Tom, and his girlfriend, Jennifer Statt. Dresden, Mac greeted me. When I sat down in the bar, the dim, comfortable room was empty, but for a pair of men I recognized by sight at a back table playing chess. Mac is a tall, almost gangly man of indeterminate age, though there's sense in him that speaks enough wisdom and strength that I wouldn't venture that he was less than 15. He has squinty eyes and a smile that is rare and mischievous when it manifests. Mac never says much, but when he does, it's almost always worth listening to. Hey there, Mac, I hailed him. Been one hell of a day. Give me a steak, sandwich, fries, ale. Ugh, Mac said. He opened a bottle of his ale and began to pour it, warm, staring past me onto the middle distance. He does that with everyone. Considering his clientele, I don't blame him. I wouldn't chance looking them in the face either. Hear about what happened at Madison? He confirmed. Nasty business. Such an inane comment apparently didn't merit even a grunty reply. Max set my drink out and turned to the stove behind the bar, checking the wood and raking back and forth to provide even heat for it. I picked up blah, 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 a pre-thumbed newspaper nearby and scanned the headlines. Hey, look at this. Another three-eyed rampage. Jesus, stuff is worse than crack. The article detailed the virtual demolition of a neighborhood grocery store by a pair of three-eyed junkies who were convinced that the place was destined to explode and wanted to beat destiny to the punch. You see anything like that? Max shook his head. They say this stuff gives you the third sight, I said, reading the article. Both junkies had been admitted to the hospital and were in critical condition after collapsing at the scene. But you know what? Mac looked back at me from the stove while he cooked. I don't think that's possible. What a bunch of crap. Trying to sell these poor kids on the idea that they can do magic. Mac nodded at me. If it was serious stuff, the department would have already called me by now. Mac shrugged, turning back to the stove. Then he squinted up and peered to the dim reflection of the mirror behind him. Harry, he said, we were followed. I had been too tense for too much of the day to avoid feeling my shoulders constrict in a sudden twinge. I put both my hands around my mug and brought a few phrases of quasi-Latin to mind. I never heard to be ready to defend myself, and in case someone was intending to hurt me. I watched someone approach, a dim shape in the reflection cast by an ancient worn mirror. Mac went on with his cooking and unperturbed. Nothing perturbed Mac. I smelled her perfume before I could turn around. Why, Miss Rodriguez, I said. It's always a pleasure to see you. She came to abrupt stop. English is hard. She came to an abrupt stop a couple of paces from me, apparently disconcerted. When the advantage of being a wizard is that people always attribute anything you do to magic. No other immediate explanation leaps to mind. She probably would think about her perfume giving her identity away when she could assign my mysterious blind identification of her to my mystical powers. Come on, I told her. Sit down. I'll get you a drink while I refuse to tell you anything. Harry, she admonished me. You don't know I'm here of business. She sat down on the bar stool next to me. She was a woman of average height and striking dark beauty, wearing a crisp business jacket and skirt, hose, pantyhose, pumps. Her dark, straight hair was trimmed in a neat cut that ended at the nape of her neck. It was part of the dark skin of her forehead, emphasizing the lazy appeal of her dark eyes. Susan, I chided, you wouldn't be in this place if you weren't. Did you have a good time in Branson? Susan Rodriguez was a reporter for the Chicago Arcane, a yellow magazine that covered all sorts of supernatural and paranormal events throughout the Midwest. Usually the events they covered weren't much better than Monkey Man seen with Elvis's love child, or JFK's mutant ghost abducts shape-shifting Girl Scout. What the fuck? But once in a great while, the Arcane covered something that was real, like the unseelie incursion of 1994, when the entire city of Milwaukee had simply vanished for 2 hours. Gone. Government satellite photos showed the river valley covered with trees and empty of life for human habitation. All communication ceased. Then, a few hours later, there it was, back again, and no one in the city itself the wiser. She'd also been hanging around my investigations in Branson the previous week. She'd been tracking me ever since interviewing me for a feature story right after I'd opened up my business. I had to hand it to her. She had instincts, and enough curiosity to get her into 10 kinds of trouble. She had tricked me into meeting her eyes at the conclusion of our first interview, an eager young reporter investigating an angle on her interviewee. She was the one who had fainted after she'd soul gazed. She smirked at me. I liked her smirk. It did interesting things to her lips, and hers were already attractive. I think he got a crush. You should have stayed around for the show, she said. It's pretty impressive. She put the purse on the bar and slid onto the stool beside me. No thanks, I told her. I'm pretty sure it wasn't for me. My editor loved the coverage. She's convinced it's going to win an award of some kind. I could see it now, I told her. Mysterious visions haunt drug-using country star. Real hard-hitting paranormal journalism, that. I glanced at her and she met my eyes without fear. She didn't let me see it if my jib had ruffled her. I heard you got called by the SI director today, she told me. She leaned toward me enough that a glance down would have afforded an interesting angle to the V of her white shirt. I left here you tell me all about this one, Harry. She quirked a smile at me with that promised things. Oh my god. I almost smiled back at her. Sorry, I told her. I have a standard non-disclosure agreement with the city. Something off the record then, she asked. Rumor has it that these killings were pretty sensational. Can't help you, Susan, I told her. Wild horses couldn't drag it out of me, etc. Just a hint, she pressed. A word of comment. Something shared between two people who are very attracted to one another. Which two people would that be? Damn, quick-witted motherfucker. She put an elbow on the counter and propped her chin in her hand, studying me through narrow eyes and thick, long lashes. One of the things that appealed to me about her was that even though she used her charm and femininity relentlessly in pursuit of her stories, she had no concept of just how attractive she really was. I'd seen that when I looked within her last year. Harry Dresden, she said, you are a thoroughly maddening man. Her eyes narrowed a bit further. You didn't look down my blouse even once, did you? She accused. Took a sip of my ale and beckoned Mac to pour her one as well. He did. Guilty. Most men are off balance by now, she complained. What does it take with you anyways, Dresden? I am pure of heart and mind, I cannot be corrupted. Okay, all men are corrupted in one way or another, but so are all women. So, you know, I really, I can't say that nobody is not corrupted. Hold on. Yeah, I moved my thingy. I moved it again. Trying to plug in my phone. It's like dying. Alright, let's continue. She stared at me in frustration for a moment. Then she tilted back her head to laugh. She had a good laugh, too, throaty and rich. I did look down at her chest when she did that, just for a second. Pure heart and mind only takes you so far. Sooner or later, their hormones have their say, too. Fuck, I called it! Oh my god, I keep hitting this thing. I mean, I'm no teenager or anything anymore, but I'm not exactly an expert in things like this either. Colored overwhelming interest in my professional career, but I've never had much time for dating or the fair sex in general. And when I have, it hasn't turned out well. Susan was a known quantity. She was very attractive, bright, appealing. Her motives were clear and simple, and she was honest in pursuing them. She flirted with me because she wanted information as much as because she thought I was attractive. Sometimes she got it, sometimes she didn't. This one was way too hot for Susan or the arcane to touch, and if Murphy heard I tipped someone off about what had happened, she'd have my heart between two pieces of bread for lunch. I'll tell you what, Harry, she said. How about if I ask you some questions and you just answer them with a yes or no? No, I said promptly. Damn it, I'm a poor liar. But she didn't take a reporter with Susan's brains to tell. Her eyes glistened with cheerful, malicious ambition. Was Tommy Tom murdered by a paranormal being or means? No, I said again stubbornly. No, he wasn't. Or no, it wasn't a paranormal being. I glanced at Max, though, to appeal for help. He ignored me. Mac doesn't take sides. Mac's wise. No, I'm not going to answer questions, I said. So, no, do the police have any leads? Any suspects? No. Are you a suspect yourself, Harry? Disturbing thought. No, I said, exasperated. Susan, would you mind having dinner with me Saturday night? No, I blinked at her. What? She smiled at me, leaned over, and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips, which I admired so much, felt very, very nice. Supper, she asked. I'll pick you up at your place, say around 9. Did I miss something? I asked her. She nodded. She nodded, darkening eyes sparkling with humor. Going to take you to a fantastic dinner. Have you ever eaten at the Pump Room at the Ambassador East? I shook my head. Steaks you wouldn't believe, she assured me, and the most romantic atmosphere. Jackets and ties required. Can you manage? Yes, I said carefully. This is the answer to the question on whether or not I'll go out with you, right? No, she said with a smile. That was the answer I tricked out of you. So she stuck there. I just want to make sure you own something besides jeans and button-down Western shirts. Oh, yes, I said. Soup. Oh, supper, she repeated. I'm dyslexic. Supper, she repeated, and kissed me on the cheek once more. She stood up and gathered her purse. Saturday, then. She drew back and corked her smirky little smile at me. It was a killer look, sultry and appealing. I'll be there, with bells on. She turned and walked out. I sort of turned to stare after her. My jaw slid off the bar as I did and landed on the floor. Had I just agreed to a date or an interrogation session? Probably both, I muttered. Max slapped my steak sandwich and fries down in front of me, and put some money more forcefully and made change. She's going to do nothing but try to trick information out of me that I shouldn't be giving her, Mac. I said, Mac agreed. Why did I say yes? Mac shrugged. She's pretty, I said. Smart, sexy, Any red-blooded man would have done the same thing. Huh, Mac snorted. Well, maybe not you. Mac smiled a bit mollified. Still, it's gonna make trouble for me. Must be crazy to go for someone like that. I picked my sandwich and said, Dumb, Mac said. Just said she was smart, Mac. Mac's eyes flickered to that smile, and it made him look years younger, almost boyish. Not her, he said. You. I ate my dinner and had no attempt that I had to admit he was right. This threw a wrench to my plans. My best idea for poking around the Cells Lake house and getting information had to be carried out at night. I already had tomorrow night slated for a talk with Bianca, since I had a feeling Murphy and Carmichael would fail to turn up any cooperation from the vampires. That meant I would have to drive out to Lake Providence tonight, since Saturday night was now occupied with the date with Susan, or at least the pre-midnight portion was. My mouth went dry when I considered that maybe the rest of the night might be occupied too, or one never knew. She had dizzied me, it made me look like an idiot, and she was probably going to try and trick me. Every trick she knew to drag more information out of me from the Monday morning release of the Arcane. On the other hand, she was sexy, intelligent, and at least a little attracted to me. That indicated that more might happen than just talk and dinner, didn't it? The question was, did I really want that to happen? I had been a miserable failure in relationships ever since my first love went sour. I mean, a lot of teenage guys fail in their first relationships. Not many of them murder their well, not many of them murder the girl involved. Um, okay. I shield away from the line of thought, lest it brings up too many old memories. After McAnally's, after Mac had handed me a doggy bag with a grunt of Mister, by the way of explanation, the chess game in the corner was still in progress, both players puffing up a sweet-smelling smog cloud from their pipes. I tried to figure out how to deal with Susan while I walked out to my car. Did I need to clean up my apartment? Did I have all the ingredients for the spell I would cast at the lake house later tonight? Would Murphy go through the roof like I talked when I talked to Bianca? I could still feel Susan's kiss lingering on my cheek as I got in the car. I shook my head, bewildered. They, they say we wizards are subtle, but believe you me, we've got nothing at all on women. Chapter 6. Mister was nowhere to be seen when I got home, but I left the food in his dish anyways. He would eventually forgive me for getting home late. I collected the things I would need from the kitchen: fresh baked bread with no preservatives, honey, milk, a fresh apple, a sharp silver penknife, and a tiny dinner set, a plate, bowl, a cup that I carved myself from a block of teakwood. I went back out to my car. The Beetle wasn't very blue anymore, since both doors had been replaced by one of green chrome, one with a white one, and the hood of the storage trunk in front had to be replaced with a red duplicate, but the name stuck anyways. Mike is a super mechanic. He asked questions about the burns, slagged a hole in the front hatch, for the claw marks that ruined both the doors. You can't pay for service like that. I revved up the Beetle and drove down to the I-94 around the shore of Lake Michigan, crossing through Indiana briefly and then crossing over the state line to Michigan itself. Lake Providence is an expensive, high-class community with big houses and sprawling estate. It isn't cheap to own land there. Victor Sells must have been doing well in his former position at Silvercoat to afford a place out that way. The Lakeshore Drive wound in and out among thick, tall trees and rolling hills down the shore. The properties were well spread out, several hundred yards between them. Most of them were fenced in and had gates on the right side of the road, away from the lake as I drove north. The Sells house was the only one I saw on the lake side of the drive. A smooth gravel lane, lined by trees, led back from the Lakeshore Drive to the Sells house. A peninsula jutted out into the lake, leaving enough room for the house and a small dock at which no boats were moored. The house was now a large one by the standards of the rest of the Lake Providence community. Built on 2 levels, it was a very modern dwelling. A lot of glass and wood that was made to look like something more synthetic than wood by the way it had been smoothed out and cut and polished. The drive curved around to the back of the house, where that driveway big enough to host a 5-on-5 game of basketball around a backboard erratic to one side was overlooked by a wooden deck leading off the second level of the house. I drove the Blue Beetle around to the back of the house and parked there. My ingredients were in the back nylon backpack. In a black nylon backpack. I packed that up and brought with me as I got out the car and stretched my legs. The breeze coming from the lake was cool enough to make me shiver a little. I drew my mantle duster closer across my belly. First impressions are important. I wanted to listen to what my instincts said about the house. Stopped for a long moment and just stared up at it. My instincts must have been holding out for another bottle of Max Ale. They had little to say other than the place looked very like a like a pricey little dwelling that had hosted a family through many vacation weekends. Well, where instincts fail, intellect must venture. Almost everything was fairly new. The grass around the house had not grown long enough this winter to require cutting. The basketball net was stretched out and loose enough to show that it had been fairly used often. The curtains were all drawn. On the grass beneath the deck, something red gleamed. I went beneath the deck to retrieve it. A plastic film canister, red with a gray cap, the kind you keep a roll of film in when you send it to the progressor. Film canisters were good for holding various ingredients I used sometimes. Tucked it in my duster pocket and continued my inspection. The place didn't look much like a family dwelling, really. It looked like a rich man's love nest, a secluded little gateway nestled back in the trees of the peninsula, safe spying eyes, or an ideal location for a novice sorcerer to come to try out his fledgling abilities safe from interruptions. A good place for Victor Sells to set up shop and practice. I made a quick circuit of the house, tried the front and rear doors, and even the door of the deck that led presumably to a kitchen. All were locked. Locks really weren't an obstacle, but Monica Sells had invited me to actually take a look inside the house, just around it. It had bad juju to go. It's bad juju to go tromping into someone's houses uninvited. One of the reasons vampires, as a rule, do not do it. They have enough trouble just holding themselves together outside of the Never Never. It isn't harmful to a human wizard like me, but it can really impair anything you try to do with magic. Also, it just isn't polite. Like I said, I'm an old-fashioned sort of guy. Of course, the Tektronic security control panel that I could see through the front door had some say in my decision. Not that I couldn't hex it down to a useless bundle of plastic and wires, but a lot of security systems will cause an alarm with their contact company if they abruptly stop working without notice. It would be a useless exercise in any case. The real information was to be had elsewhere. Hold on, I'm going to take a sip of my drink real quick. Very good, very good, very good. Still, something nagged at me. A sense of not quite emptiness in the house. On a hunch, I knocked on the front door several times. I even rang the bell. No one came to answer the door, and no lights were on inside. I shrugged and walked back to the rear of the house, passing a number of empty trash cans as I did. Now that was a bit odd. I mean, I would expect a little something in the trash, even if someone hadn't been there in a while. But the garbage truck comes all the way down to the drive to pick up the trash can. That didn't seem likely. The Cells came out to the house for the weekend and wanted the trash emptied. It was standard reason that they'd have to leave it out by the drive near the road as they left, which would seem to imply that the garbage man would leave the empty trash cans out by the road. Someone must have brought them back to the house. Of course, it needn't have been Victor Sells. It could have been a neighbor or something. Or maybe he tipped the garbage man to carry the cans back away from the road. There was something to go on, a little hint that maybe the house hadn't been empty all week. I left the house behind me and walked out toward the lake. The night was breezy but clear, and a bit cool. The tall old trees creaked and groaned beneath the wind. It was still early for the mosquitoes to be bad. The moon was waxing toward full overhead, with an occasional cloud slipping past her like a gauzy veil. It was a perfect night for catching fairies. Swept an area of dirt not from the lake shore, clear of leaves and sticks. I took the silver knife from the backpack. Using the handle, I drew a circle in the earth, then covered it up with leaves and sticks again, marking the location of the circle perimeter in my head. I was careful not to focus in concentration on the circle, without actually letting my power slip into it and spoil the trap. Then, working carefully, I prepared the bait by setting out a little cup and bowl. Poured a a thimbleful of milk into the cup and dumped the bowl full of honey from the little plastic bear in my backpack. Then I tore a piece of bread from the loaf I had brought with me and picked my thumb with a little knife. In the silver light of the moon, a bit of dark blood welled up against my skin, and I touched it daintily to the underside of the coarse bread, letting it absorb the blood. Then I set the bread, bloody side down, on the tiny plate. My trap was set. I gathered up my equipment and retreated to the cover of the trees. There are two parts of magic you have to understand to catch a fairy. One of them is to concentrate on is the conception of true names. Everything in the world has its own name. Names are unique sounds and canons of words that are attached to one specific individual, sort of like a kind of theme music. If you know something's name, you can associate yourself with it in a magical sense, almost the same way a wizard can reach out and touch someone if he possesses a lock of their hair, fingernail, clippings, or blood. If you know something's name, you can create a magical link to it, just as you it's just as you call someone up and talk to them if you know their phone number. Just knowing the name isn't good enough, though. You have to know exactly how to say it. Ask two John Franklin Smiths to say their name for you, and you'll get subtle differences in tone and punctuation, each one unique to its owner. Wizards tend to collect names of creatures, spirits, people like other kinds of huge Rolodex. You never know when it'll come in handy. The other part of magic you need to know is magic circle theory. I like how he goes on and explains stuff. Most magic involves a circle of one kind or another. Drawing a circle sets a local limit on what a wizard is trying to do. It helps him refine his magic, focus, and direct it more clearly. It does this by creating a sort of screen defined by the perimeter of the circle that keeps random magical energies from going past it, containing it with the circle so that it can be used. To make a circle, you draw it on the ground or close hands with a bunch of people, or walk around spreading incense or any of number of other methods while focusing on your purpose in drawing it. Then you vest it with a little spark of energy to close the circuit and it's ready. One other thing such a circle does, it keeps magical creatures like fairies or even demons from getting past it. Neat, huh? Usually this is used to keep them out. It's a bit trickier to set up a circle to keep them in. That's where the blood comes into play. With blood comes power. If you make it someone else's blood, if you take in some of someone else's blood, there is a metaphysical significance to it, a sort of energy. It's mystical if you aren't really trying to get energy that way, the way vampires do, and it is enough to close the circle. Now you know how it's done, but I don't recommend that you try it at home. You don't know what to do when something goes wrong. I retreated to those trees and called the name of the particular fairy I want. A rolling series of syllables, quite beautiful, really. Typically, since the fairy went by the name of Toot Toot every time I encountered him before, I pushed my will out along with the name, just made it a call, and something that would be subtle enough to make him wander his way of his own accord. Or at least that was the theory. What was his name? Please, do you think wizards just give information like that away? You don't know what I went through to get it. About 10 minutes later, Toot came flickering in over the water of Lake Michigan. At first, I mistook him for a reflection of the moon on the side of the softly rolling waves of the lake. Toot was maybe 6 inches tall. He had silver dragonfly wings sprouting from his back and pale, beautiful, tiny humanoid form that echoed the splendor of the Bay Lords. A silver nimbus of ambient light surrounded him. His hair was a shaggy, silken little mane, like a bird or parasite's plums, and was pale magenta. Toot loved bread and milk and honey, a common vice of the lesser fae. They aren't usually willing to take on a nest of bees to get to the honey, and there's been a real dearth of milk in the Never Never since high-tech dairy farms took over most of the industry. Needless to say, they don't grow their own wheat, harvest it, thresh it, and the mill it flour to make bread either. Toot alighted on the ground with caution, scanning around the trees. He didn't see me. I saw him wipe at his mouth and walk in a slow circle around miniature dining set, one hand rubbing greedily at his stomach. Once he took the bread and closed the circle, I'd be able to bargain information for his release. Toot was a lesser spirit in the area, sort of a dock worker of the Never Never. If anyone has seen anything of Victor Sells, Toot would have, or would know someone who had. Toot dithered for a while, turning back and forth around the meal, but slowly getting closer. Fairies and honey, moths and flame. Toot had fallen for it several times before, and it wasn't in the nature of the Fae to keep memories for long, or to change their essential natures. All the same, I held my breath. The fairy finally hunkered down, picked up the bread, dipped it in the honey, and greedily gobbled it down. The circle rose with a little snap, then occurred just at the edge of my hearing. And the effect on Toot was immediate. He screamed and shrilled a little scream, like a trapped rabbit, and took off towards the lake in a buzzing flurry of wings. At the perimeter of the circle, he smacked into something like solid as a brick wall, and a little puff of silver motes exploded out from him in a cloud. Toot grunted and fell onto his little onto his little fairy ass on the ground. I should have known, he exclaimed as I approached from the trees. His voice was high-pitched, but more like a little kid's than the exaggerated kind of fairy voices I heard in cartoons. Now I remember where I've seen those plates before. An ugly, sneaky, ham-handed, big-nosed, flat-footed mortal worm. And I told him, you remember our deal from last time, or do we need to go over it again? Toot glared defiantly up at me and stomped his foot on the ground. More silver fairy dust puffed out from the impact. Release me, he demanded, or I will tell the queen. If I don't release you, I pointed out, you can't tell the queen. You know just as well as I do that she was sick. Say about my dewdrop fairy, who was silly enough to get himself caught with a lure of bread and milk and honey. Toot crossed his arms defiantly over his chest. I warn you, mortal, release me now, or you'll feel my awful, terrible, irresistible might of the fairy magic. I will rot your teeth from your head, take your eyes from their socket, fill your mouth with dung, and your ears with worm. Jesus! Hit me with your best shot, I told him. After that, we could talk about what we need to do to get out of the circle. I'd called his bluff. I always did, but he probably wouldn't remember the details very well. If you live a few hundred years, you tend to forget the little things. Toot sulked and kicked up the little spray of dirt with one tiny foot. You could at least pretend to be afraid, Harry. Sorry, Toot. I don't have the time. Time, he complained. Is that all you mortals ever think about? Everyone's complaining about time. The whole city rushes left and right, screaming about Bean Lake and honking horns. You people used to have it right, you know. I bore the lecture with good nature. Toot could never keep his mind on the same subject long enough to be really trying it in any case. Why, I remember the folk who lived here before the pale wheezy guy came in, and they never complained or about ulcers or Toot eyes wandered to the bread, milk and honey again, and glinted. He sauntered that way and snatched the remaining bread, sopping up all the honey with it and eating it with greedy bird-like motion. This is good stuff, Harry. None of the funny stuff in in it that we get sometimes. Preservatives, he said. Whatever. Toot drank the milk too, and Long pulled and promptly fell down on his back, patting his rounded tummy. All right, he said. Now let me out. Not yet, Toot. I need something first. Toot scowled at me. You wizards always needing something. I really could do the thing with the dung, you know. He stood up and folded his arms hauntly over his chest, looking up at me as though I weren't a dozen times taller than him. Very well, he said, his tone lofty. I deign to grant you one single request of some small nature for the generous gift of your cuisine, or to keep a straight face. It's very kind of you. Tooth sniffed and down, somehow managed to look down his little pug nose at me. It is my nature to keep both benevolent and wise. I nodded as though there was very great wisdom. Huh. Look, Toot. I need to know if you were around this place for the last few nights, or know someone who was. I'm looking for someone who maybe came here. And if I tell you, Toot said, I take it you will dissemble the circle which has, by some odd coincidence, no doubt, made its way around me. It would only be reasonable, I said in all seriousness. Toot seemed to consider it as though he might incline not to cooperate, then nodded. Very well. You have the information you wish. Release me. I narrowed my eyes. Are you sure? Do you promise? Toot stamped his foot again, scattered around more dust. Harry, you're ruining the drama. I folded my arms. I want to hear you promise. Toot threw his hands up. Fine, fine, fine. I promise, I promise, I promise. I'll dig up what you want to know. He started to buzz around the circle in great agitation, wings lifting him easily to the air. Let me out! Let me out! I promise. I promised thrice, made it close to absolute truth as you could get from fairy. I went quickly to the circle and scuffed about the line, drawing in the line with my foot, willing the circle to part. It did. It did with little hassle, hiss of release energy. Toot streaked out of Lake Michigan waters again, a miniature silver comet, and vanished in a twinkle just like Santa Claus. Though I'd say Santa is a much bigger and more powerful fairy than Toot, and I don't know his true name anyways. You never see him trying to nab Saint Nick in a magic circle, even if I did. I don't think anyone has stones that big. I waited around, walked about to keep falling asleep. If I did that, Toot would perfectly within his rights as a fairy fulfill his promise by telling me the information while I was sleeping. And given that I had now captured and humiliated him, he'd probably do something to even the scales. 2 weeks from now, he wouldn't remember it, but if I let him have a free shot at me tonight, I might wake up with with an ass's head, and then think that would be good for business. So I paced and waited. Two usually took about half an hour to round up whatever it was I wanted to know. Sure enough, half an hour later, he came sparkling back and buzzed around my head, drizzling fairy dust from his blurring wings at my eyes. Ha! Harry, he said, I did it. What'd you find out, Toot? Guess. I snorted. No. Oh, come on, just a little guess? He scowled, tired and irritated, but tried not to let it show. Toot couldn't help to be what he was. Toot is late. It's late. You promised to tell me. No fun at all, he complained. No wonder you can't get a date unless someone wants to know something from you. I blinked at him, and he chortlingly, I love it. We're watching you, Harry Dresden. Now that was disconcerting. I had sudden image of dozens of fairy voyagers lingering around my apartment windows and peering inside. I have to take precaution to make sure they couldn't do that. Not that I was afraid of them or anything, just in case. Just tell Toot, I said. Incoming, he shrilled, and I had my hand out, fingers flat and palm up. He aligned in the center of my palm. I could barely feel his weight, but the sense of aura of him ran through my skin like a tiny electrical current. He stared fearlessly at my eyes. The Fae have no souls to gaze upon, and they cannot fathom a mortal soul even if they could see it. Kate, she said. I talked to Blue Blossom, who talked to Red Nose, who talked to Neg O Aspen, who said that Golden Eye said that he was riding the pizza car when it came here last night. Toot thrust out his chest proudly. Pizza car? I asked, bewildered. Pizza, Toot cried bluntly. Pizza, pizza, pizza! His wings fluttered again, and I tried to blink the damned fairy dust out of my eyes before I started sneezing. Fairies like pizza? I asked. Oh, Harry, Toot said breathlessly. Haven't you ever had pizza before? Of course I had, I said. Toot looked wounded. And you didn't share? I said. Look, maybe I could bring you guys some pizza sometime soon. To thank you for your help. Toot leaped about in glee, hopping from one finger to another. Yes, yes, wait until I tell him. We'll see who laughs at Toot Toot next time. Toot, I said, trying to calm. Did you see anything else? Toot tittered, his expression slyly, and suggested. He said that there were mortals sporting, and there needed pizza to rein their strength. Which deliberately placed Toot. Fairy blinked and stared at me as though I was hopelessly stupid. Harry, the pizza truck. And then he darted off skyward, vanishing in the tree above. I sighed and nodded. Toot wouldn't know the difference between Domino's and Pizza. He had no fame of reference and couldn't read. Most fairies were studiously averse to print. So I had two pieces of information. One, someone had ordered pizza to be delivered here. That meant two things. First, that someone was here last night. Second, that someone had seen them and talked to them. Maybe I could track down the pizza driver and ask if he had seen Victor Sells. The second piece of information had been Toot's reference to sporting. Fairies didn't think too much of Moral's idea of sporting, unless there were a lot of nudity and lust involved. They had a penchant of shadowing Nick teenagers and playing tricks on them. So Victor had been here with a lover of some kind, or for there to be a sport going on. I was beginning to think Monica Sells was in denial. Her husband wasn't wandering around learning to be a sorcerer, spooky scorpion talismans notwithstanding. He was lurking about his love nest with a girlfriend. Like any other husband bored with a timid and domestic wife might do under pressure. It wasn't abnormal, but I guess I could understand the motivations that could have caused it. The only problem was going to be telling Monica. I had a feeling she was going to want to listen to what I had found out. I picked up a little plate and bowl and cup and put them back into my black nylon backpack, along with a silver knife. My legs ached from too much walking and standing about. I was looking forward to getting home and getting some sleep. The man with his naked sword in his The man with the naked sword in his hands appeared out of the darkness without warning, rustling of sound or whiff of magic to announce his presence. He was tall like me, but broad and heavy-chested, and he carried his weight with a ponderous sort of dignity. Perhaps 50 years old, his listless brown hair going gray in uneven patches, he wore a long black coat, a lot like mine, but without the mantle, and his jacket and pants too were done in dark colors, charcoal and deep blue. His shirt was crisp, pure white, the color you only see with tuxedos. His eyes were gray and touched the crow's feet at the corners and dingers. Moonlight glistened off those eyes at the same shade it did from brighter silver of the sword's blades. He began to walk deliberately towards me, speaking in a quiet voice as he did. Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. Irresponsible use of true names for summoning and binding on others to your will violates the fourth law of magic, the man intoned. I remind you that you are under the doom of Damocles. No further violations of the law will be tolerated. The sentence for further violation is death by the sword, to be carried out at once. Alright, we're going to call it a break here today, guys. Thank you so much for joining, and if I'm feeling like it, we'll probably stream tomorrow and continue this book. Like I said, thank you for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!